Hello, so I've been wanting to do some demos of simple subjects, um, and this one is going to be a demo of two pieces of fruit, a nice red apple and a sort of greenish yellow pear. And these are designed for people who are fairly new to watercolor. There's not huge compositional choices we have to make. The subject's fairly simple. They're not really designed for absolute beginners, although everyone is very welcome to paint along. But people also have been painting a while might like to revisit the basics, because we'll be going through identifying the colours, modelling the form, doing some drawing. So let's get on. Right, let's have a quick chat about materials. I don't usually talk about my materials, I should do. So I'm going to be working on some Fabriano Artistico paper. This is 11 by 15, it's called sheet. I'm working fairly large, even though it's just an apple and a pear, just so it shows up well on the screen. I would recommend, if you're doing it yourself, it may be half this size or even a quarter this size. It's often easier working smaller when you're painting, so that might be a better size if you're doing it yourself. Of course, I mean, it's up to you really. I'm going to use a mechanical pencil. I think this is just an HB 0.7mm mechanical pencil for drawing. I've got my water. I'm just going to quickly go through my paints. I'm going to bring them across. We're not going to be using a huge number of colours here. And I have kind of evolved not to use as many colours as I have in the cupboard. I have hundreds of colours, and I've boiled it down to these ones. So I've got a lemon yellow in here. I think this is actually a Hansa yellow, but it says a lemon yellow will do you well here. It's kind of a greenish yellow. It hasn't got any orange in it at all. We won't be using this. This is cadmium orange, but we won't be using that. I have two reds. So we have an orangey red. This is actually vermilion, but something like a naphthol red or a pyrrole red or a cad red, probably medium, would do with this. As long as it's slightly orangey, it will be fine. And I've got a pinkish red, and this one is actually, I think this is Da Vinci Red Rose Deep, but a quinacridone rose or a permanent rose or quinacridone red at a pinch, I think would do, or quinacridone magenta, but something that has a pinkish hue will work well here. I have some yellow ochre, which we probably won't use. I have some burnt sienna, which we will be using. These dried up ones are kind of guest pigments that I obviously haven't really taken to, since I haven't looked at them. This is cerulean blue, which we won't be using. This is cobalt turquoise, which I don't think we'll be using either. I have two blues as well. So I have ultramarine blue, which is a slightly purpley blue, very slightly purpley blue, and I have some cobalt blue, which is slightly more on the green side. And the final one is a black, and we will be using a bit of black. I like to use lamp black. It's very intense. You only need a very small amount of it to make a difference. But ivory black should do just as well. Okay, so there are my pigments. And the brands of these, they're a mixture, to be honest. I think these are Da Vinci. This is Winsor & Newton. I think this one's Turner. That's Da Vinci. I think that might be Sennelier. But I have no real favorite brand. The practical reason that I use a lot of Da Vinci and Winsor & Newton is that you can buy the paint in bigger tubes, which is much more cost effective. And I get through a lot of these colours, so it's worth it for me. Okay, so there's the paint. So I'm going to just pop him back. I'm going to be mostly using, I think this is a size 10 sable. This is an Escoda Reserva Kolinsky sable. It's a beautiful, beautiful brush. It points really, really well. Holds lots of water, and they cost a lot of money. An alternative to that, I have a number of alternatives. So actually this one is a nice one. It's I'm just putting some water on him. It's silver black velvet. I think there's squirrel, although don't quote me on that. then they're not as nice as sable, but they point well. You can see that there, it's pointing quite nicely, and they hold a nice lot of water. They're slightly floppier than the sables. The sables kind of spring back nicely, but they hold a lot of water. They point well, and then they're nice to work with. They're nice tools to use. The other two synthetics I like are the Escoda Versatile, which is almost like a sable but not quite, and also the Princeton Aqua Elite series are also good. But the thing is about sables, once you've used a sable, I find that once I've used a sable, I find it very hard to move away from them. Okay, so I have some water, I have some paper towels, and I have my reference photo, a little bit of tape on the back so it will stick. And the other thing I'm going to use is this, which has a very fancy name called a colour isolator. I think some people call it a colour checker, but it's just a little bit, this is just paper actually, printed with a mid-grey, neutral grey value, so it's halfway between white and black, and it has a 1/2-inch square hole cut in the middle, and it's nice for if you're looking at something and you're not sure of the color, you can put it over the top, and the gray will isolate that color, and you can see it much more easily. And I just printed this out on my inkjet and took a X-Acto knife to excise out the middle. If you go to my website, there's a page of materials that has a template for this, if you with the mid-gray on it already. Okay, so I think that's it. I have got a spray bottle. We probably won't be using the spray bottle, but sometimes it's handy to have it close. The other thing I have, and I will be using this a little bit, or maybe not actually, but a value scale. This again, there's a link to it from my website, and it's a nice one. It's plastic, quite clean. And it has half value steps on it, which I like very much. So if I just check this should be around a 5. Yeah, that's kind of, actually maybe a little darker. Printers vary a lot, so it's about 4.5, but that's good enough. That's good enough. Okay. Oh, and I should say this is I'm not quite sure how you pronounce his name. This is made by Paul Centaur or Centaure. I don't know. At one point I will find out definitively how to pronounce his name. And if you look for Munsell value scale on eBay, you can get this for $10, and it's well worth it. Okay, so a little bit of promotion out the way. Let's have a look at our reference. Now, first of all, we're going to be doing some drawing. So let's push the paints out the way. So let's draw him out. Now, the drawing isn't crucial here. We have fruit, and you have quite a bit of leeway with fruit, but I'm going to go through how I would approach a drawing like this. And so first of all, I would start with the bounds. Where's my bottommost piece? Where's the top? Probably I'd forget the stalk, just the top of the fruit. Where are the rightmost pieces and the leftmost piece? So let's place him roughly on the paper. So this is going to be where the bottom of him is, and the top of him I'm going to put up here, and then from here let's place the top of this apple, and I'm going to relate it to the height of this pear. So the top of this apple is kind of 3/4 of the way up this pear, so that's kind of half kind of here. So I'm just going to lightly put a mark on there. I don't know if you can be able to see my marks on the screen. I think you can just, yeah. I don't want to put them too darkly in. So this is my pear. Let's put where the left hand side of this pear is. Now the width of this, I'm going to kind of, let's measure this and see. I would usually say so it looks around halfway. Just using this. Yes, it's just over half the height. So let's put the leftmost piece in, because we have some leeway with that. And half the height, say it comes up to about there. It's kind of fat actually, isn't he? It's a fat pear. I'll put this right right side down here because he's definitely fatter at the bottom than he is at the top. Okay, and the next thing I'm going to put in, actually we haven't done the apple yet, but I'm going to put in where this little crevice is, and it's just below halfway, so kind of here. That's this will be, so this will come down, so kind of here. Just going to put a little dot there, and that's where the apple will come up and over. And I'm going to eyeball the width of this apple. It's slightly, I don't know, it might be pretty much the same. So let's make them pretty much the same. Let's put him over here. Okay, so I have my bounds. I have this angle positioned at the bottom of the apple. It's also slightly up from the bottom of the pear. So it's kind of here. Okay, there's that angle there, comes out, and then the other angle, which that apple pops out from the back of the pear. I'm just going to pop that in. Okay, right, now let's join these pieces up. And I'm going to start at the top of the pear, and I'm not looking at the pear really, I'm looking at this line, dividing it from the pear from the background, and looking at the angle. So it starts off, and sometimes I find it useful to relate it to the, I've forgotten the word, I'm relating it to a clock face. So that's kind of 7 o'clock. Then it comes down, and it gets steeper. I might have started him too far over. I have. In fact, I have. Let's bring him back again. Yeah, I should. Yeah, it's a, so that's 7 o'clock. Brings him down. Then he kind of kicks out at the bottom. Comes out. And then comes back in again. At the bottom, I'm just relating this bump to what it does at the top. That's right. Comes in a little bit, a little bump, another little bump round to the side. Just pop that flap up because it's getting in the way. Comes back in a little bit, and again I'm looking at that sort of inflection point there. It's just above that angle dividing the fruit. Come up again and over. Okay, just a quick pause. Okay, sorry about that quick interruption. Back. Right, let's just pop this stalk in. And again, I'm kind of looking at this angle that it makes. I'm pretty much looking at the wall. So it comes up and it's just left of vertical. Pokes out a little bit at the top. There we go. That's not too bad. Right, let's pop this apple in. I'm going to do this angle here. I think I've got my angle slightly wrong, but anyway, it will look like an apple and a pear. So it comes up fairly close to vertical, and it comes over, and it comes actually, it's kind of flat, and then he goes around. Okay, this is the right hand side. It's a little divot here. Comes round. So, at the bottom of him, that's kind of almost straight there, and then he curves back in. A little flat bit, that's kind of that's an angle there. And he comes back to here. Okay. And this little divot at the top, which is quite important in showing that it's an apple. And then the stalk that comes out, and it's the stalk's just poking up a little bit there. There we go. So that's the fruit. But we also want to put in these shadows. These cast shadows are really quite important to show that they're sitting on something, and it places them in space. There's this one here. Starts here and then kind of comes out. Now, if I was doing what I call a proper painting, let's put in this back plane, and this shadow there. There's a little bit of shadow just behind that pear. I'm in two minds whether to put that in. So he comes in a bit, doesn't he? All right. In two minds whether to put that in or not. Let's see what they look like. And there we go. We've got our fruit. There's another cast shadow on the apple here, which I'm not going to draw in. We're going to have to just do that one by eye. But it starts here. That should be fine. Okay, great. So we have a drawing. And we can now start thinking about colour. Now, let's start with this pear. Now, I'm going to do some colour swatches here. Actually, I'm tempted to do that. I'll do them actually on the thing. I doubt very much whether this one's going to go on the wall. So we have our pear. It's got a little bit of highlight in there, which is the lightest bit. But the lightest bit on the fruit is kind of here. And it goes into shadow, and there's a slight hue change as well. This is kind of a slightly orangey colour. This goes slightly more greenish up here. And then the darkest bit on the pear is actually here, which is this sort of greenish colour. And we have a little bit of reflected light in here from the apple, which makes the shadow go brown. So we're going to do some swatches for this colour. Probably this shadow over here. It's also slightly darker around the edges, but we can deal with that. And maybe have a look at what this colour is on just next to the red apple. Right, I'll just draw some boxes. These. I like drawing boxes. There we go. Right, now this is where our colour checker comes in. Now we can just eyeball this, and I really recommend that you do have a guess before you start using the tools. It's easy to become overly reliant on tools, and but they're really there just to help you learn and train your eyes. If you get immediate feedback on what's right and wrong, it's much easier to learn. So let's have a look at this colour. I'm just eyeballing this. And it's a yellow. Let's start with what the hue is. It's a yellow. Is it a greenish yellow or an orangey yellow? I think it looks kind of neutral, really. So it's just a yellow. And it's very bright. And I know that very bright yellows are very light in value. So I'm going to say it's like a high value, mid hue yellow. I'm just going to put colour checker over. Yeah, I don't think my opinion has changed. It maybe looks slightly more orangey than it did when I was just looking at the fruit, but I think that's pretty much a good estimate. So let's try and mix up this colour as closely as we can. So we know it's a yellow, so we're going to start with the closest pigment we have to that, which is our lemon yellow. So I'm just going to get I've got a damp brush, putting some colour, and I put it on the palette. I almost never take paint straight from the wells onto the paper. I'm just going to add in a very, very, very small bit of water. This isn't to make it lighter. We know that if you watercolour, you add water to it, the colour will get lighter. So it's actually just to make the paint flow. And I'm just going to put a little dab it's next to this box just to see how it looks. And let's bring that in. Yeah. So I think it's actually just, oh, you can't see that at all. I'm going to move my image over the other side, I think. There we go. And now you can see. Apologies for that. Let's make them a bit smaller. There we are. Okay. So if I put the photo, it's ever so slightly more orangey. I mean, we could get away probably with using this colour, but let's be strict with ourselves. And it's a very small amount of orange. So this is my orangey red I'm using. I could go straight to the cadmium orange, but I'm going to stick to the pigments that we first talked about. Just a little bit, just to shift that. Yeah, and I think that is almost perfect, so I'm going to go with that and fill in my box. One thing, I can't save this paint and use it later. I mean, I could mix it up now and then start painting, but I generally don't tend to do that. I like to do the colour swatches first, and I could write next to it what it is. Actually, let's just do that, just to give you a little bit of a lemon yellow plus, this is vermilion, but it's whatever your orangey red is. In practice, I find that I can usually remember the combination of colours I used. Once you've done the thinking once, it kind of comes back quite easily. Okay, so the next colour we're going to do is this shadow colour here. So I'm going to try and guess what it is. And it looks, I think it's kind of a green. It looks green back there. And how light and dark is it? We need to know the value. The value is how light or dark it is, because that's the thing that will give us a three-dimensional impression of the pear. And I'm going to guess that's around a mid-value. You know, I think that's it's probably around a 5. And you can check this with your value scale. Let's have a look. Is it around a 5? I put it right next to it, and I squint my eyes. Actually, it might be slightly darker. And when the edge between the colour and the value scale disappears, I know I've hit the right value. And you squint your eyes because it takes the colour out and reduces things to just a value. It's quite hard to judge values of bright colours, and squinting your eyes really helps there. And let's use the colour isolate. I'm just going to put it on the edge because it's not a big enough piece. Yeah, that's definitely a green in there. It's kind of an olive green. And this is a mid-value as well, so we want a mid-value olive green. Okay, so how do we do this? So this is going to be a bit of a, it's not really a trick. We could mix our greens. We could do that. That would work. I don't have a green on the palette. I mean, I always mix that. We could mix our greens from a blue and a yellow. We could do that. But I'm actually going to start with my yellow. I'm going to add in just a little bit of black. This is quite powerful stuff, so you've got to be careful with it. And it turns it a beautiful olive green. Just going to put in enough black. I want to take this down to a mid-value. Okay. Now I'm just going to look at that cut. Yeah, I think let's put a little swatch here. Right, that may be a little light. I think it probably is a little light. But I think that's a good colour. I think that's good colour. Maybe a little more black. I don't want to put in too much black because it will take it darker, but it will lose the greenness. Yeah, I'm gonna go with this one. So this is lemon yellow and black. It's a lovely colour, isn't it? A beautiful olive green. I'm just gonna note down next to it what I used. There are a lot of people who say you should never use black painting. I have to say I don't use black straight from the... I very rarely paint with black, but I will use it as a modifier pigment for other colours, and I think it's very, very useful for that. Okay, so they're going to be our two main colours for the pear. We've got the light side, we've got shadow side, and this in here is lighter still, but we'll add in some water to this to make that light. The other one is this reflected shadow. Now this is going to be tricky. So it's the pear's got some reflected light from the red apple, which has turned that shadow kind of, I think that's a brown in there, and probably about the same value. Let's just have a look. I don't know, maybe it's slightly. Oh, no, I'm squinting my eyes at it. Now, it might look different on the screen. Yeah, I think it's slightly darker, but not hugely darker. So that's a brown just below mid value. So let's just clean the palette. And I have a suspicion, I didn't plan it like this, it's just an accident. I have a suspicion that burnt sienna is going to get us a lot of the way there, right? I can put a little bit of burnt sienna in there. I want it to be quite rich. We have to get it quite dark. Let's have a look at that. Just put a little piece here. Yeah, it's not quite dark enough, I don't think. But I think it's close enough. I'm going to go with that. Okay, this is just pure burnt sienna with a little water in it, just to make it make the paint flow on the paper. You don't want to be spreading water on the paper. All right. Okay. So that's our pear. And there's a few other little bits. There's probably burnt sienna-ish in there. And we might do some of these markings and dots. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. Okay, so now let's look at our apple. Again, we have these highlights, which I think that's actually right in the center of that highlight. It's white. Just around it is kind of a light pink, maybe a grayed out pink, low chroma pink in there. But the main part of it, say here, and then we have the very dark shadow there, and then we have a mid value. I don't know if we're gonna, let's just do the red and the very dark one. And then this shadow here is a slightly lighter version of that. Well, let's do this main color first. Now, it's a red. We know it's a red. Is it an orangey red or is it a pinkish red? I think it's kind of more pinkish than orange. Would you say that? I think that's probably the case. And the value, reds like this are a surprisingly low value. I'm going to say it's around 5. It might even be lower. So let's put the color isolator on. I think it is. It's a 5. It's a value 5. I'm putting this color isolator on, and I'm squinting my eyes to take the color out, and then the square kind of disappears, and so it's kind of around a 5. And I think it's slightly pinkish, that red. It's definitely not orange. It's got little orange tinges to it to the side. So, but it's not as pink as our pinkish red. It's between these two. So let's start with our pinkish red, right? And I think you can see, let me bring the palette back in. So it's between these two. So I'm going to start with my pinkish red. And then I'm going to add in a little bit of my orangey red, which will push it slightly, a little bit more pink. Just looking at this. Let's test this in a little swatch. I should have done my boxes the other side, shouldn't I? Now that, I think it's probably close, it's slightly darker here. Yeah, I think that's fine. I think it's about the right value. We'll be doing some blending for the shadows, so think that's good. Yes, I like it. I like it. So that was a mixture of our vermilion and our permanent rose. Okay. I do like a clean palette. Right, so let's write this one on. It's burnt sienna. I generally just use initials. Permanent rose plus vermilion. Okay, now let's have a look at the shadow side of this apple. We know it's going to be darker than this because there's less light on it. And one thing we're not going to do, although in practice we might, we're not going to assume that we can just add black to this and make a darker colour and it will work. Sometimes it will. I mean, this to there, and all we did was pretty much add black. We didn't add any vermilion in this actually, but I think we got close enough without it. So let's have a look at this. Let's have a look at this shadow here. Now I think that is almost black right at the edge. So let's come a little bit in and see what that is. It looks kind of like a very dark maroon colour. I think it's similar to here. I'm going to put the colour isolator on, maybe around a 2 or a 3 value. Yeah, it's darker. You can see it's darker than the surround. And it is kind of a maroon colour. Have a look in here. Right. Okay, so let's try this. We don't have a colour, that colour on our palettes. So we have to use what we have. Now, we're going to start with our pinkish red. We could try adding some burnt sienna, but I don't think that would, even that won't take us dark enough. I'm going to try adding some black and see what it does. Now it may take too much of the red out. It might not. The thing about black is, it being black, is that it tends to make everything grey, which it's very useful for, I have to say. But sometimes you don't want that. Right, will that be dark enough? Oh, I think that's quite good. I am actually going to add in a little bit, I'm going to add in a little bit of burnt sienna. I just want to shift that hue slightly less pink. I could add in the orange, but I don't want to take it any lighter. So I'm just going to add in a little bit of burnt sienna. Yes, that's all else. I think we're good. And the other thing about these mixes is we'll be doing this in layers. So we'll be layering on top of that colour. So these mixes won't be exact, but I do find it useful to be able to mix up the exact colour and know how to mix that. And we can maybe just lighten this up a little bit when we put the colour down. Okay, well, the only other thing I want to do, and then we can actually start doing some painting, is these shadow colours. Now, these can be tricky, the ones on the ground. Photos tend to make these very, very grey. So we'll find out what the photo says it is, and then we'll decide whether that's how we want to paint it. So let's have a look over here. Now it's a grey. It may have some colour cast to it, but I can't. Maybe a slight yellow colour cast. It's hard to. Yeah, if anything, I would say it's going kind of yellow. I mean, it's very, very grey, so it's a very greyed out yellow. And the value of that in there, I'm going to say it's around 6. I'm going to get my value scale out and check that. Yeah, it's around 6. It's not 5.5. And I'm squinting at it again. If I squint at it, this edge disappears. So that's around 6. I reckon that's around a 5. Yeah, so that's a 5. And that's a 6. Oh, there we go. And these are kind of neutral, these colours. So there is a very slight yellow tinge to it, but I'm going to ignore that. So, whoops, permanent rose plus black. That's, you know, plus black. And let's just mix up a grey. I wouldn't usually do this. I mix up so many greys that I just really need to know that it's a value 5 or value 6 grey. In fact, a really good exercise is, I did this for a while before I started painting anything. I would test myself for whether I could mix up mid-value greys, and I got very good at it. A bit off the boil now because I've stopped doing that exercise. Right, so a grey. Now we're going to mix complements. I'm not going to use black for this. I never used black for a pure grey. So I'm going to use complements, which is an orange and a blue. Brown is a dark orange. And they should mix up with burnt sienna and ultramarine, if I have them in the right proportions, into a nice neutral grey. It's going to shift it slightly blue, but I think I might, oh no, maybe not. Right. I'm going to try get the consistency right, just a little bit more. And this is the thing about watercolor, you can't judge how it's going to look on the paper by how it looks on the palette, not by the color anyway, but I can tell from the consistency. It's kind of the consistency of maybe, what is that? I know, heavy cream. It's maybe slightly too brown still. Right, and that might be a little too dark. Let's have a look on here. Slightly too brown, slightly too dark. And watercolor does dry a little lighter. So a little more water in there. Yeah, that's better, and I think that will dry back to a nice mid-grey. Okay, so that's our shadow. This is a 5. That was for the back shadow. A little more water will take us up to a 6 for that inner shadow. Okay, nice. And one of the other reasons I like to do these swatches ahead of time is that once I've got them down there, I look at them and do they work together? And I think they do. I think they look good. Okay, right. Finally, we can put some colour on the paper. Yay! And I'm just working out where to put this. That you've got the reference over. I'll put him behind the overlay. There he is. I'll just make that overlay a little bigger. The thing I do have to remember is not to point at the photo. Right. Okay, so let's start with this pear. Since we started with swatches, just write down that burnt sienna plus ultramarine blue, value 5. Now I'm using this is actually, I think this actually might be an 8. I'm going to use this to switch to a slightly bigger brush. I've got quite a bit of an area to fill there, so I'm going to move to a, what I think this is a 12. So again, it's a sable. And we're going to mix up this colour. We're going to leave a little space where that highlight is, but we're going to colour in the whole thing. I want to put this wash in very evenly. There won't be any three-dimensional form to it at all. That will come later when we put the shadows on. But I want to put paint down nice and evenly, so there are no brush strokes visible or stripes. So the best way to do this is have the paint the right consistency to start with. So I've just got a little bit of water on there. Just test that next to my swatch. Maybe a little more pigment in there. Now I'm going to put it down. I'm going to start at the top and work down. And kind of the golden rule for this is I'm trying not to touch bits I've already painted. I'm kind of going up to it and just poking the brush in, but I'm not going in and disturbing what I've already done. And I'm using the whole of the brush here. It's kind of, it's this bit of the brush that's doing the work back there. It's the full length of those bristles are on the paper. I'm not doing this. I'm trying to hold the brush quite a way back on its handle. Oh, and I've got my highlights. I'm going to leave a little bit. I'm not going to bother about the exact positioning of that highlight, I don't think. I was thinking actually I should have just wet the paper around that highlight so we don't have hard edges. I don't mind hard edges on fruit actually. I'm just going to soften that bit. I'm cleaning my brush. My brush needs to be really clean for this. I'm also dabbing it on a paper towel to take the water. I don't want blossoms in here. I'm just going to wet that paper inside and the pigment will flow into it. I'm hoping my brush isn't so wet it gets blossom. That has dried a little too much. Just to soften those edges a little bit. Trying not to go back in. Okay, that didn't really work, but never mind. We can fix that later. Right. Or we might leave it actually. Okay. I think that's okay. Now, if you've seen other demos, I very often go through the boundaries of objects and lose edges and only put in certain defined edges. We're not going to do that today. We're going to keep it really quite crisp and tight. Okay, and we need to let that dry. So while that is drying, let's put in the colour for the apple. Now this was this one, and it was Permanent Rose and Vermilion, a pure mixture of that. Okay, I'm using a fair bit of pigment in here because again we've got quite a bit of paper to cover here, and again we're going to do the same thing. We're going to try and put in as even a wash as we can. It's not going to look like an apple yet. It's not looking like a pear yet. But we want to put this in very evenly. Right, just a little test here. Okay. Right, now I'm going to try and remember where my highlight is. I'm actually going to wet the paper slightly. This is what I forgot to do on the pear. I'm just going to wet the paper slightly where that highlight is, so we'll get soft edges when we get down there. Right, I'm going to start at this edge, not the very top, but this edge of the apple. Yeah, isn't that kind of fabulous? And go around that highlight. I'm going to be quite careful around this edge. I'm just hoping that pear is drying. To use. I've lost the this brush has lost its point a little bit, which is annoying. I kind of need it. Alright, let's go up here, hoping this hasn't dried. Come down. And down to the bottom. Yay, look at that colour. Awesome. Oh. And a little bit around the back. Now I know there's some lighter pieces here. I'm going to paint around that stalk. And I'm just going to leave that piece in there light. Again, I'm taking a damp brush, dabbing it on a paper towel. Take that excess water off. If your brush is too wet, the water will flow into the paint, and we don't want that. Just put a little bit of water on the paper. We'll just soften that edge a bit. Okay, how are we looking? Oh, it's not too bad. Right. I think I'm going to put in these shadows down here because we know the values. Yeah, let's do that. So we want a value 6 for this one and this one. So let's do that. We need to mix up a 6, which is going to this was a 5 we mixed up. So we need to be slightly lighter than that. So ultramarine, burnt sienna, ultramarine, and Right, now that's, judging by the consistency, that's going to be slightly too dark. A little bit of water. I'm kind of erring on the light side. I'm just squinting at the image. I'm going to have a bit more water because there is some slight variation in those shadows. They're slightly darker at the front and they fade out at the back. So I'm going to make it slightly lighter. Then we can always come back in and darken it. I find it hard to talk when I'm concentrating on these bits. Okay, all right, this will just be the first layer for this. And again, this one here. I'm going to go out into this back one as well. Comes up. Oops. A bit too much paint on there. And similarly, I'm trying to put it on as evenly as possible. Trying not to go back into areas I've already painted. The pigment kind of sorts itself out when you put it on the paper and blends together, and if you start going back in with a brush full of pigment or water, it loses that beautiful even texture to it. Okay, right, there we go. Well, at this stage it's looking how it should look, which is flat. We haven't put any 3D modeling on it. We've got our little highlights, which kind of look nice. But it should look flat at this point. Don't try and make it look three-dimensional at this point. The flatter it looks at this point, the easier it will be to put our shadows in and make it look three-dimensional. Okay, right, I'm just gonna put the video on pause for a couple of minutes and make sure these shadows are dry, and then we'll come back in and start making it look a little more convincing. Okay. Okay, and we're back, and he's pretty dry. He's not perfectly dry, but he's dry enough that we won't smudge anything. So let's get going on our pear again. I'm going to go back. I'm just going to keep on with the bigger brush, I think. If you're working smaller, the smaller brush would be fine. Let's mix up our shadow colour, and that's going to go mainly, it's going to be darkest here. And I think we will go over this side. Then we're going to add a little bit of water to make it slightly lighter, going around the edges. This is where it's lightest and brightest. Okay, so we've got our recipe, which is lemon yellow and a little bit of black to make up that nice olive green. We don't need as much of this because we're only putting shadows on. I'm just going to test it. This is why these swatches are useful. Okay, it needs more. I'm going to need more yellow and more black because it needs to be a richer colour. Okay, that looks a bit better. Right. Now, if you do have two brushes, actually I'm going to use two brushes here. I'm going to use one brush to put the paint on. I've got a nice clean brush. It's just been dabbed slightly on a paper towel to take the excess water off, and I'm going to use that to smooth the edges. This is a technique that is really quite tricky to get right, and I'm going to go through it. So I'm just going to put down a stripe of colour here. I'm not going to do the whole thing because I don't want it to dry. Maybe just around the top. And now I'm going to take my damp brush. I'm going to pull the tip of the brush, just poke slightly into the colour, and it's drying so quickly. And what I'm really doing, I'm wetting the paper on this side so the pigment blends out to make it look like a shadow. I'm trying not to go back into the paint. If I go back into the paint, I'll get all sorts of uneven looking areas. So another stripe goes down. You have to work quickly with this. And paint is drying very fast in here. The other thing you can do is wet the paper to begin with, and then the paint will spread naturally. I'm just going to put, I think we need more down here. Just going to put a little bit top, getting a damp brush, and I'm just wetting the paper just below that pigment. Just to, oh, that brush wasn't very clean, was it? And I'm just going to, a little bit of water in here just to lighten it up a bit. I want to put a bit around this edge too, but it's not quite as dark. Again, nice damp brush. I might risk going back into the paint. If the paint is wet enough, you can go back into it. A little more over here. Just to get the shape of that pear in. Horrendous blossoms, apologies. No, it's going to need some gussying up later, I think. A little bit more here. I think we probably will need to go a little darker. It's kind of not quite as green as it should be, but I think we'll be okay. Okay, and that is starting to give us a bit of shape to that pear. I'm going to go straight in, a little bit of burnt sienna for this shadow down here. And my paper's still a little wet, so it should blend nicely, and it is. Right, okay. There we go. That's not so bad, is it? While I have this burnt sienna up here, let's put in just a little wash, some very small highlights up there, leave a little bit of paper for that. For this stalk, a little bit of burnt sienna colouring on the tip of it, and I'm hoping, yeah, the paper's just wet enough that it'll blend slightly. Now I've got a damp, but most of the water I've taken out of this brush just to coax that paint in a little bit. Yeah, and I'm leaning back and assessing, are the shadows in the right place? We need a little bit more on here, I think. I'm not going to do it now. I'm going to let it dry and then come back. Okay, it's starting to look better. It's not great, and I should have softened these edges there, which I didn't, but anyway. I find that when I'm talking through the steps as detailed as I can make it, I tend to miss things. Okay, right, let's do this apple. I'm feeling quite excited about this now. Right, so we need our dark permanent rose, burnt sienna, and black. Actually, it was quite useful putting that down there. So permanent rose, a bit of burnt sienna. So this will take it slightly darker and also slightly more orangey. And then the black will take it the rest of the way. Now, let's do that. I'm going to do that. We've got some red down there already, so they will add together a bit more burnt sienna. Right. I know the shadow's very, very dark over there. I'm just squinting at it, seeing where this shadow goes. Okay, that's not going to be dark enough, is it? Not dark enough at all. That's okay. We can make it darker. It's making it lighter. Then just lightly wetting the paper around that edge so that edge is softened. I'm just going to drop in a little more pigment in there. It's dark back here, another little bit. And this softening of the edges, it gives it form, it makes it look round, but we also get a range of values in there. So we've only mixed up, you know, 5 colours, but we get a whole range of colours out of it because we're using the water. Right, let's put this shadow in here. I really didn't go dark enough, did I? Right, it actually starts here. There we go. There's a little bit of darkness. I'm just looking at that. It's actually kind of grey in there. It's not really dark. Again, a softening brush, damp brush, just wetting the paper right next to that pigment so the pigment rushes into where it's wet. I'm going to add in a bit more black and see if we can gussy up these shadows a bit more. I'm hoping this is going to be wet enough. It'll take the paint and blend, and it will, just about. And a little bit of slightly darker colour in there. Once it's dried past a certain point, you're just not able to do this. You have to wait for it to dry and then layer on top of it. Okay, that's not so bad. Come on, blend. Okay, so I just went past that point there, and the pigment's just sitting there, which is what I didn't want it to do. I'm going to risk smoothing this. I don't want it to look overworked. Okay, that will have to do. Right, let's put this stalk in again. Okay, I'm just gonna guess this is roughly fancy, and I'm just gonna stick in a little bit of vermilion in there just for a stalk. Slightly light a bit there. Then we'll go back in. It's not quite dark enough, but there's a bit of colour on there. Just going to take off that white. I don't like those white bits. Okay. Right. So that's layer 2. And the final thing is this back shadow was slightly darker. So I'm just going to put a light glaze of our burnt sienna ultramarine mixture over it. To brown. Come back. So that's going to add a fair amount of water. I want this to be really quite light because it'll add. We only want to go 1 shade darker there. Just to darken this back here. Oh, I should be a little more careful then. And there we go. I went over the line and annoying. Very annoying. Oh, no, I'm going to leave it. No, I'm not. I'm going to fiddle with it. I've got a very dry brush here. Just take that out. Okay, right. So let's just and have another 2-minute pause to let him dry, and then we'll come back, put a little more form in, just darken up some of the shadows a bit more. I think we'll try putting in some of these spots and see how they look, and then we'll be done. Okay, we're back. Just been standing back having a look at it. I'm very happy actually, and I know we've got some blossoms in here and some hard edges. I kind of like those. It's got a good watercolor feel to it, and this reflected light I think is working pretty well. this colour is wrong. I do want to get the colours as close as I can. I think it needs to be slightly darker and slightly more orange, but let's do that in a minute. And the other thing I'm thinking I probably do want to put this shadow in. Yeah, let's do that first. Let's just clean up the palette. Right, there we go. Let's put in this back wash. No, you could use a bigger brush here, but I think actually I'll use my black velvet one. This is a 14. Let's mix up. Let's first of all, what is that value? I reckon that's around a 6 back there. So let's check. Yes, that's a 6. I'm going to take this image off. I don't think we actually need it because the photo is up there, and then you can see what I'm doing. Right. Okay. Yeah, that's around a 6. So we want to value 6 grey, and we'll go back to our trusty combination: burnt sienna and ultramarine. I'm mixing up a fair amount here because I've got a fairly large area to cover. Mix that in, and I'm mixing pretty well. It's a nice technique sometimes to not mix your colours too much on the palette and then let them mix. Let's put some in here. Let them mix on the paper, but we're not doing that today. We're trying to, this is kind of a colour matching, trying to get it as right as we can. Right, a bit more. I'm going by the consistency of it. Let's put my, I reckon that will be about right when it dries. I'm actually going to take it a shade lighter, so just a little bit more water. And is that going to be too brown? Let's see, this may not work. The other thing I'm going to do before we start is just wet the paper. We've got a soft edge up there, so I'm just going to wet the paper. It helps if I have a clean brush. Just around that edge, so when I put the paint down, it'll blend out naturally. I'm going to pick up the palette because I need my arm over here. Right. A little bit more water, I think. It's slightly too brown, but I'm going to go with it. And I'm using the tip of the brush to go around that edge. Back up. And if the paint is still wet, you won't get hard edges. Paint will blend together naturally, and you shouldn't have to encourage it too much. Let's just put another little stripe down here. There we go. Yeah, it's not quite the right colour, but it's okay. Right, now we're going to let that dry. There's some little shadows behind that pear, which we will put in. But now let's work on getting a little bit more form into this pear. And these are going to be really subtle changes. So we're going to use fairly light washes. It's going to be the same mix, but we're going to add in more water to make it lighter. Right, I'm going to go back to my size 12 brush, and let's mix up our colour. Lemon yellow, which my brush seems to have a load of pink on it from the apple. I probably should have started again with that, but anyway, this is what we have now. Right, a bit more water. Actually, I may start that. I think I'm going to start that again. Because it is slightly greener up there. I don't really want to lose that. Shall we go back to this? We didn't. So this black velvet brush has only had grey on it, so should be better. Right, lemon yellow. Also, I think my water needs changing, which I didn't do. A little bit of black. If I just test this, I think I want to go a little bit more water. I want this slightly lighter. You can see how the consistency changes there. Right. I'm going to get my smoothing brush out ready. Let's just put in, it needs more shadow over this side. So I'm just going to put in some colour, and then my smoothing brush on the outside to smooth that area. A little more in here, down to the bottom. I think a little more is actually slightly darker there, and I'm really looking at the photo and seeing where are the dark pieces, or darker pieces I should say. And smoothing brush, just putting on a little bit of water there. I'm not sure that's made it better actually. A little bit of burnt sienna just to beef up this shadow here. Right, I think it needs to go slightly darker up there. Just adding in a little bit of ultramarine just to make it slightly darker. I'm using the smoothing brush now, which I shouldn't be. Just to give it a little more sense of form up there. Paint goes down, then a clean brush, just drag it across that edge. Just seeing all these terrible bits I've left in here. Right. Slightly greener up there. I'm just mixing up a little bit of lemon yellow and ultramarine to make a slightly bluer green up there. Okay. I think that's gonna have to do, right. And what? No, actually, it's too wet. We need to put these little shadows here. I think that will have a big effect. Right, now, this apple, I'm going to take that main colour, slightly darker, slightly more orangey. So I'm going to mix up my pinkish red, a little bit of my orangey red, and a bit of burnt sienna. Burnt sienna is an orange and it's darker. A little bit of water so that paint flows. Right, let's put it over. Try and intensify this colour. Leave little bits around that highlight. I'm being kind of fussy here. If I was painting this as a painting, I probably wouldn't do this. But I'm trying to get, oops, trying to get that nice intense red of that apple. We're going to have to darken up our shadows now. So a little bit of black in there. And that paint should still be wet, so it will blend. It's not blending there. I don't want to put too much water on that. A little bit more in here. A little bit more. I'm looking at the photos to see where are the darks, where do I need to intensify the darks on this. Smooth that edge. That edge to show up quite well. Still need a bit more on that side. It's looking a little bit better, and it's like there's a little bit of shadow up there as well, so slightly lighter. A bit more water in that mix, just to give it a little bit of value change at the top. That's looking a lot better. And these small value changes, they make a big difference. Oops, I didn't want to do that. Never mind. Never mind. Okay, and I'm fiddling with it. I really shouldn't be doing this. Doing a lot of squinting at the painting and a lot of squinting at the photo as well. Just going to lift a bit of colour there. Oh, that's gone too dark. In fact, I'm looking at it. You'll find this as you go through. You start finding slight colour changes, slightly browner down there. Right, that didn't go so well, did it? Damp brush. Smooth out that edge a little bit. Okay, right. We're almost done. Almost done. I'm just going to stand back and have a look. My apple seems to have got a little furry. I've gone outside the edges, which obviously I wouldn't recommend. Right, let's just wash our brushes and clean up our palette again. Let's bring them back into shot. Apologies for that. Brushes. Right, let's clean up this palette. As you can probably see, I'm not one of these people who has puddles of colour left all over their palette. Right, now I'm back to my very small brush now. Let's put in this grey shadow bit behind this pear. It'll bring it forward a bit and give the painting a bit of depth. I'm going to guess that value is kind of a couple of values down. Let's mix up pretty much this colour, because it will add to what's already there. Let's just put in a bit of shadow. It starts again here. Gosh, my hands are shaking. Gets quite fat at the bottom. Just lightly, quickly rather, washing my brush out. just dragging the tip of that brush across that edge, which is wetting the paper, just letting that pigment blend out a little bit. Trying not to go, actually, I'm doing what I said I shouldn't do and go back into it. Just to give that a little bit of form back there. Okay. Now, other thing is a little more darkness on this. Actually, I won't use black for that. Just looking for areas now that have a little bit of very low value on them. There's the side of the stalk. So this is just my standard grey I'm using. I know that's not actually grey back there. Just want to give it a little bit of form. Softening brush just to touch up those pieces. Now under here it's also darker because there's very little light in there. So I'm going to darken up that shadow in there, and then it'll come out and blend lighter. Again, this is a damp brush. And there's a little bit of dark under here, which I'm going to put in. And under here, it's really sitting on the bottom of that, whatever it is it's sitting on. Damp brush, just get that paint to flow out and have a nice gradient. Actually, I'm gonna slightly darker towards the edge. I'm going to encourage some of that pigment to come out there. I think it's slightly darker just behind that edge. Damp brush, so that the routine is the paint goes down and then the damp brush comes in, wets the paper just to the side of it. Not get so many hard edges there. And the pigment blends out. Right, now this apple stalk, again, it just needs a little bit of darkness on the shadow side. And again, this is just my grey. I think actually I've got a bit of black in there at the moment. You don't need much. When I go in with my damp brush and just stop that from looking like too much of a hard edge. Lost my lighter pick there, but never mind. I'm just going to try and do something with this highlight. It's looking a little big, isn't it? So let's try that. Seem to be dropping brushes a lot today for some reason. Alright, let's go in with this yellow. Just to make that a little smaller. I want it to have a highlight, but I don't want it to be quite as big as it was. Again, this is a damp brush coming in just to stop those edges looking too hard. Right. Now, I did say we'd try putting in some of those dots, so let's try that. I'm going to use again a mixture of this ultramarine and burnt sienna, which is a combination I use an awful lot. Let's just try and put some dots on. So there's one here. Now the edges of this are actually soft. So again, a damp brush, just wetting the paper just next to where I put the paint. So the pigment blends out a little bit. You do it the other way, you could wet a piece of the paper and then put the paint into it. Again, damp brush. I think I lost that one. Drop a little bit in. The paper's wet, so it'll work. Gosh, when you start looking for these, they're everywhere. I don't want to overdo it though. We don't want to put in every wrinkle and blemish on this. We just need enough to make it look like a pear. I think it's working okay. Another little one in there. Just a little bit in here. Yeah, okay, I think that's probably enough for that. Okay, well, I think I'm going to call them done. I think that was useful. I have to say it's not the best painting I have done by a long shot. But I'm fairly happy. So the aim was we get the colours right, and colours both in the light and in the dark, which we have. I'm happy with the colour of that apple now. It's much closer to that lovely rich red. The pear has got some form to it. I have terrible edge control in here, but I think it's okay. Actually, one last thing. I'm not sure this background works, but I'm just going to put a light wash over the foreground. Because this is very, very pink. You know? A light wash over the foreground. Just to put a little bit of colour into that. I won't need very much, it's very light. It's, you see it's almost transparent on the palette there. Okay, that may be a little too much now. Very light, just test it on the side. Yeah. Just going to put a wash over the water, I think. This foreground just separates the foreground from the background. Another stripe, and I'm kind of, the tip of my brush is just poking into the previous stripe slightly, just enough so the brush strokes, different brush strokes blend together. Let's take this all the way down since we're here now. There we go. Actually, I think that improved it no end, didn't it? Okay. Well, there we go. I hope that was useful, and I hope to see you again. And please subscribe if you haven't already. And I hope to do some more of these simple subjects, which the subjects may be simple, but the execution was surprisingly involved. Anyway, thank you for watching. I will see you next time.